Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you have decided to look at this week's video, and we are looking at the book of Philippians, and we've begun Paul's Thanksgiving section, specifically verses 5 and 6 this week. But do notice that this particular paragraph is verses 3 through 11. So we're going to be here for a little while. I'm trying to do a couple of verses each week. Again, I haven't decided if I will go ahead and diagram next week verses 3 through 6. I'm kind of thinking about going the other direction and walking through all the verses 3 through 11 before I diagram. So we'll see. We'll see how things go next week. But this week, let's look at verses 5 and 6. And as always, we're going to translate. Look at the translation here for each of these verses. Translating the word epi here is because. So because of your fellowship or partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that the one who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Again, mentioned at the beginning that epi, the preposition there at the beginning, I'm going to suggest is probably a causal preposition. It's another grounds, if you will, for the thanksgiving that began in verse 3. So this prepositional phrase here probably refers back to the main verb in verse 3. And that is Paul gave thanks because of the Philippians' partnership or fellowship in the gospel, which is this phrase, the entire phrase there. And this phrase, eis ta ou angelion, which is this phrase right here, this is also another prepositional phrase. Probably translate that best in the gospel. That is, it's in the gospel ministry that they're partnering along with Paul. And then the remaining two prepositional phrases, apates, protes hemeros, that ought to go to there. Then you have akri to noon. Those two prepositional phrases, they're temporal phrases, and they're summarizing, if you will, the Philippians' time that they've had in the gospel ministry with Paul. It's from the first day until now. Then as we move on to verse 6, again, I think there's another causal relationship here. You have a perfect active participle, masculine nominative singular of peitho. So this participle here is peitho. And again, I think it's a causal participle providing, again, another reason for Paul's thanksgiving in verse 3. The alta tuta, I think that could also be translated this very thing. Again, likely pointing forward to the hati clause, which begins here. And that hati clause there is probably a hati of content. So this very thing, and then what is the very thing? What's the content then? It's the one who has begun a good work in you. So the narxamenos, this participle right here, is a substantival participle, the one who, likely that's God who begins the good work. Again, we'll see to it that it's completed. Then you have the epitelese. Okay, this verb right here, third person, singular future. Third person, singular future. There is your ending there. Active indicative. of epiteleo, and it's basically to carry it on to completion. And that's God's doing and God's work. So that's verses 5 and 6. Again, a number of prepositional phrases that Paul is using here. Again, I think it's drawing us back to this whole concept of Paul giving thanks with the verb eucharisteo from verse 3. Have a great week. See you next week.